Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I have two books to share with you that I have recently read, and I'm going to tell you right up front that I really enjoyed both of them. So I feel like I have my reading mojo back. I definitely think I was slumping towards the end of August there and just really struggling with every single book that I picked up, even if I ended up enjoying it. These two books, however, were a joy, a pleasure. Neither of those words apply, but I enjoyed both books in some way. Let me just get into it because maybe as I explain what the books are about, my hesitation in saying I enjoyed or had a pleasant reading experience will make more sense. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Perfume by Patrick Suskind, The Story of a Murderer. That is the subtitle of this book. This book was originally published in 1985 and is a work of what I would call probably literary horror. It's translated from German and it is such a fascinating book. Perfume is set in the 18th century in Paris and tells the story of Jean-Baptiste, who is born in a time in France and really in all of Europe where everything smells. Like, it is wretched, it stinks, there is no sewer to speak of, and yeah, everything just sort of flows from one person to the next, if you will. And despite Jean-Baptiste having an incredible sense of smell, he himself does not actually smell like anything, which again is very unusual for this time period. And it's basically the coming of age story of an apprentice, a perfumer, and a murderer. That is basically how the story goes. And it is so fascinating to follow him on his journey through life, if you will. This book covers a variety of topics, including some historical information about what it was like to live in 18th century France. You get discussions in detail about perfumery and how that was basically starting to become a thing. You also have lots of discussions about obsession, love, desire, smell, of course, and even some heavy discussions of religion and God. Speaking of religion and God, I think that was one of the lows in this book for me. I definitely felt like it was a book that had a very low view of religion in general, particularly Christianity and Catholicism, for understandable reasons during that time period. But I also felt like there was a lot of negative messaging about religion and faith as a whole. So that is something that you should know going into the book if that is something that you don't like to read about. I personally don't mind. It was just something that in this book I found kind of unexpected, and it was definitely just one perspective and thought on that. And it came up even in the characterization of religious and faithful people in the book. You were never going to get a positive portrayal of that. So do keep that in mind as you read this book. The highs in this book for me, though, or at least one of them, was actually characterization. I felt like each of the characters were really unique, distinct people, and even our protagonist was his own person who was really well described. You got a very deep psychological look at his worldview and how he lived, and that included some body horror, which there is throughout the book. But it was tolerable in that it wasn't too dark or too long, and it wasn't constant. It was just you'd get a little bit and then you would move on, and you'd get a little bit more and then you would move on again. But it is definitely there, especially at the end of the book, which was not at all where I saw things going, but also kind of made sense. As weird as that sounds. If you know how this book ends, you know what I'm talking about, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Would I recommend this book? Yes, surprisingly, I would. I do not like scary books. I do not like scary things. I'm the biggest chicken, but I am finding more and more that I think that is two visual things. And while this book has really great imagery and does help you imagine what's going on, I felt tense but not scared in reading it. I would say probably the part of the book that I felt most scared in was just at the very beginning, but as I kind of saw that it was going to be more of a creepy vibe occasionally through the book, I became less concerned about this. So I do think this is a book that even if you don't tend to read horror, that most people could handle. Because again, most of the horror tends to be around like smelly, gross things. So if that doesn't bother you, you could definitely give this a try. I did end up giving this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, the only reason it missed a 5 star for me is because I just thought it was too one-sided on its perspective of religion and faith. I think this would be a great book, however, for anybody who likes to look at the foundations of faith and religion, how that might be created or generated in people and people's relationships to those things. This is also a really good book to look at and explore how people relate to one another and why. Obviously, you get a lot of information about perfumery. I think I for sure have never learned as much about perfumery as I did just in dabbling through this book. And it really made me stop and think about sense of smell and the place of perfume in life, and just the fact that, like, somebody had to invent perfume. I mean, of course they did, but I don't think it's something that most of us ever stop and think of. And yet we use all sorts of scented things on a daily basis. At least I do. And yeah, I think if you like Gothic literature, you would really enjoy this book. It definitely felt more like a classic Gothic novel to me than contemporary horror, despite the fact that this is basically a more contemporary book. I would not consider this a classic in terms of having been written, over 100 years ago. But, at the rate we're going, soon it will be. And I definitely do see how this could be a classic in the horror genre in general. It was a really good book, really fascinating, and I'm so glad I read it. The next book I read is Adulthood Rites by Octavia E. Butler, and this is the third book in the let me try that again. This is the third book in the Xenogenesis series. That was a lot of like odd sounds to have to combine together all at the same time. This book was published in 1988 and I loved it. Like, I love just about everything Octavia E. Butler writes. This book did not hold me back. Did I say this was the third book? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. This is the second book in the series. The first book in the series is Dawn, and I read that, and that is the book that I'm going to describe the premise of because I don't want to give things away for book two. So, book one is Dawn, and I will put that up on the screen for you so you can see what that cover looks like. And in this book, you have a young woman named Lilith who has experienced multiple awakenings. And in these awakenings, she occasionally experiences memories of the past that have to do with what she calls the humanicide of the world. And that is all that she can recall of life up to whatever point she's at. And at this point, all she knows is that she is in a very sort of sterile hospital like setting, and she's not sure if she's in a situation where she's being healed or held, or if the people who are keeping her there are friends or foes, basically. And Dawn and the whole series in general, including Adulthood Rites, is a series that talks in depth about xenophobia, racism, gender, truth, lies, relationships, genetics, and really the entire human condition and what makes humanity act towards itself as it does. And Octavia E. Butler definitely has some strong thoughts and opinions about that. Book one, you start getting introduced to all of those ideas, and I would say book two starts to explore them further from multiple perspectives. And you start to get more and more of her thoughts on those. And I'm imagining book three will be like the future potential of it all. I'm not sure, but I'm excited to find out. The highs for this book for me were everything. I think one of the things that I really like about this series and Octavia E. Butler in general is that she can introduce some really fascinating themes and discuss them all at length without losing sight of the plot and storytelling. And I find that that can be very hard to do. Like, I rarely find in her books that you have a character sitting in isolation by themselves thinking about all the themes in the book and then go back to the story. Like, that does not happen with Octavia E. Butler. She will be continuing to tell you a really exciting and interesting story with very complex characters while also fleshing out the themes and the meanings the entire time. And I think that's a rare skill and talent. She also does things in her story, especially for it to be science fiction, that I think are really unique and different, even compared to more contemporary science fiction. And I think that can also be hard to do in a very niche genre. Like, I feel like the elements, and especially the initial elements she introduces in her stories, whether it be time travel or encounters or whatever, are not new or unique things, but she takes her plots in directions that you just don't expect. And I definitely found that to be true in book two. This was another 5-star read for me. She is an all-time favorite author, up there with Wilkie Collins and Charles Dickens. Don't ask about that trio, but that's what it is currently, and I'm not mad about it. So I would recommend this book to anyone who has read book one and enjoyed that. This book to me did not suffer from second book syndrome. I think it's just as good as the first book. If you liked Parable of the Talents or in Parable of the Sower, I think this feels like it could almost be in the same universe in some ways. Her characters feel very familiar, and some of the ways they talk about things sound very familiar. So it's definitely going to feel like Octavia E. Butler, but at the same time, it's a very, very different plot. So if you liked that book and you want to move from dystopian to more sort of heavy sci-fi type of things, I think this would be a good series to give a shot. I don't know that I would say this is the series that I would start with Octavia E. Butler, because she's definitely challenging the reader to think differently about lots of different things, and you may want to get used to her style of writing before you start getting challenged by her thoughts. That's just my opinion. I also think this is a really good book for anybody who likes social conflict in books or social commentary in books, and likes to look at the ethics of technology, especially as it has to do with human genetics. How does Octavia E. Butler wrap all those things into one story? Good question. You've just got to read and find out. So that's it. I feel like this is going to be a way quicker video than normal, but they're two books. They were both basically 5-star reads for me. I mean, I could probably say this is a 5-star and probably should, but take it with a grain of salt, which is what I did. And yeah, I also feel like they look really nice together. But if you're looking for two good reads, two shorter reads, both of these I read just in a day or two. So they went really fast for me, and they're pretty well-known books. And I think for good reasons, I would recommend them both with no problem. And yeah, that's it. Let me know what you're reading and how your reading month is going, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.